When I think about the state visit of President Havel in the USA in '98, when President Clinton was president, when I think about something special, what comes to my mind, so certainly it would be the state dinner and the reception before, when President Clinton and Hillary Clinton welcomed President Havel and his wife in front of White House, escorted him to the second floor, and then there was a private reception before the state dinner. To thank him for his role with the membership of Czech Republic, NATO. So it was a very special event, and it reminds me the history when the friendship between President Masaryk and President Wilson helped the newly established independent Czechoslovakia. And in '98, '97 in Madrid, the friendship between Havel and President Clinton helped newly established, newly independent Czech Republic to find its secure place in Europe, to find its security in NATO.
The state visit of President Václav Havel to the United States in September 1998 was one of my most amazing and greatest experience during my 10 years spent in the Czech presidential office. My name is Sabina Tančevová, and I was in charge of all protocol and logistic details as a member of accompanying party during the visit. I will never forget the state welcome ceremony in the South Lawn of the White House. The moment of announcement into loudspeaker that President of the United States of America and Mrs. Hillary Clinton are approaching, and that they walked out of the big doors of the White House. And at that moment, a limousine with the Czech presidential couple slowly drove up to them. It was so moving that I had tears of emotions in my eyes. After the two couples greeted each other, military honors and national anthems fell out. I was so proud of President Havel because I realized that such great honors in the White House are bestowed only to the great statesmen. I felt so privileged and happy that I was part of the Czech delegation.
The state visit of Václav Havel in the White House in 1998 was remarkable for several reasons. I remember as highlights of that visit, especially the fact that Václav Havel insisted on a concert in the White House during the state dinner, at which Lou Reed would perform and be brought from Prague for that concert a Czech rocker Mela Hlavsa, who was a member of a formerly dissident group, the Plastic People of the Universe. So that was certainly something that was very uncommon. And I remember that the American organizers were a bit perplexed by Havel's request, but they went along because Havel had a huge credit in the United States. As far as the agenda of the meeting, one, of course, is that Havel did a lot of work on trying to persuade American congressmen, especially senators, to vote for the accession of the Czech Republic and other Central European countries to NATO. And Madeleine Albright helped him quite a lot in this effort. So that is the visit in a nutshell. Of course, there were many other important and interesting moments, but these are the highlights as I remember them.
I remember this visit in the September 1998, which Havel paid to United States very well. It was very symbolic for him, and President Clinton, I guess, wanted to appreciate everything what Havel done for the mutual relations between both countries, but also what Havel played the leadership and the role of the leader of the Central Europe after the changes at the beginning of 90s. One of the topic which from my point of view was very important for Havel and was also very much discussed during his visit to US, it was the security and particularly the NATO, because Czech Republic, Poland and Hungary joined in NATO in spring 1999, but the membership was approved shortly before his visit in April 98 by American Senate. And it was mainly President Clinton and State Secretary Albright, but of course many other players who helped this ratification to be possible. And Havel understood very well what this means for his country, but for the freedom and democratic development of the whole Europe and for security, Europe, United States, and all the Atlantic area. I think that we can see that today, when Russia invades Ukraine, how important this step promoted and was made by United States and by other Western allies. Thank you.
I had the privilege of being involved in President Václav Havel's state visit to the United States in September 1998. This was at a time when the effects of the Velvet Revolution were still felt worldwide, and especially in the United States. Václav Havel's commitment to democracy, human rights, and freedom of expression resonated with many American political figures, and his background as a playwright and dissident inspired American audiences. His journey from a dissident challenging an oppressive regime to becoming a statesman symbolized resilience and courage, both qualities that Americans admired. At every level in America, Havel was extremely well received, be it in his political meetings with President Clinton, Madeleine Albright, Henry Kissinger, or with his meetings with members of the public or the artistic community. This visit definitely felt special. And I believe it felt special not only for our side, but also for the American side. It certainly felt as if history was in the making.
Good evening. Welcome to the Clinton Presidential Center presents Václav Havel at the White House. This program is a collaborative partnership between the Clinton Foundation, the Clinton School of Public Service at the University of Arkansas, and the Clinton Presidential Library. I'm Stephanie Sims, Supervisory Museum Curator for the William J. Clinton Presidential Library and Museum. In early December, we unveiled a new and exclusive temporary exhibit titled Be Our Guest. This exhibit is a true treasure trove of 14 memorable diplomatic visits during the Clinton administration, offering a unique perspective through rarely seen images and videos, gifts given to the Clintons by world leaders, official correspondence, historical documents, and more. It's a must-see for anyone interested in history, diplomacy, and presidential visits. Tonight, we have a rare and unique opportunity to delve into one particular moment in history, welcoming President Václav Havel from Czech Republic to the United States. Our esteemed panelists for the evening are Ambassador Glyn Davies, who served as Executive Secretary for the National Security Council in the Clinton administration, and Veronika Brazdilova, the International Projects Manager with the Václav Havel Library, and currently a Fulbright Scholar with the library. Both panelists will discuss the state visit from the perspectives of Presidents Havel and Clinton. Before we begin, I'd like to recognize Dr. Jay Barth, Executive Director of the William J. Clinton Presidential Library and Museum, and tonight's moderator, Stephanie Street, Executive Director of the Clinton Foundation and former Assistant to the President and Director of Scheduling at the White House, who will also guide our discussion and ensure a fruitful exchange of ideas. We hope tonight's conversation is informative and enjoyable for everyone here while providing valuable insights and knowledge. We extend our gratitude to you all for being a part of this event. At this time, I invite Veronika to give an overview of President Havel's life.
Thank you for the invitation and for this opportunity to present Václav Havel to you. When I was doing the research for this event at the wonderful Clinton Library archives, I found actually Clinton's speeches with the transcription of the name of Václav Havel, and I thought it would be funny for you to learn it as we Czechs say it. So it's Václav Havel, and if you want, you can say it with me. Václav Havel. Yeah, that's it. Great. Thank you. Václav Havel was a playwright, writer, dissident, and a president. He was not a poet, which is a common mistake in the English-speaking countries. He did write a few poems when he was young, but I think he would not identify himself as a poet. He was playwright first. And if you don't know his theater plays, I strongly recommend you to read or see them, because they are very funny. It's an absurd theater. It's a very intelligent humor. And they describe well life in a communist country, but they are also timeless. They can still relate to the current events. And I think it was a strength of Václav Havel in his speeches that he wrote himself about Russia, about Ukraine, or about European Union. It seems like the speeches were written yesterday. They are very current. He was really visionary. He was born in 1936 in a well-situated family in Prague. And in 1948, communists controlled by the Soviet Union seized power in Czechoslovakia in a coup d'etat. So in 50s, the dark time for our people came. People had no freedom to decide on their own lives. There were repressions, political trials, censorship, violations of human rights and freedoms, and travel bans. Most of the Havel family property was stripped off, and he couldn't study what he wanted. He worked in a theater, and he began writing theater plays. I would like you to understand that the whole period of communism wasn't the same. In the 60s, the life gradually improved, and we were hoping for a better future. This culminated in a so-called Prague Spring in 1968. Havel plays were shown in theaters. It was a huge success, and they were also shown abroad. And Havel himself actually traveled to the United States in spring 1968. He heard here the music of Velvet Underground, and he even smuggled some albums back to the Czechoslovakia. Unfortunately, in August 68, the armies of the Soviet Union and neighboring countries invaded Czechoslovakia, and the totality rule was reinstalled. Havel's plays were forbidden. He became a band writer and a dissident fighter against the regime. He was one of the spokesmen of the Charter 77 civic initiative. For his human rights activities, he was several times in prison. The longest period was for 4 years. And what is really extraordinary, he was in prison in 1989 from February to May. Then in November, there was this Velvet Revolution, nonviolent movement, which actually ended the communism. Sorry. And Havel was elected president in December 1989. So in the same year, he was in prison. His first travel to the United States was already in February 1990. And he gave this wonderful speech at the joint session of the Congress, received standing ovations. His task was like put us back to the map of the world, join NATO and the the European Union. And actually it was NATO first and the European Union only 5 years later. He was president of Czechoslovakia, and when we peacefully split to Czech Republic and Slovakia, he was president of the Czech Republic for 2 terms. He died in 2011. And I would like to invite you to check the website of the Václav Havel Library, because we do have some nice resources in English. There is an 8-minute video about his life, which will give you a more detailed view. And there are also like a learning 6 times 10 minutes video for students about Václav Havel life, but also about the history of human rights. And there are worksheets for students, etc. And I put this picture with my loving family here because I know they are looking online. So I just wanted to thank them for the support because without them I couldn't be doing my Fulbright project. But I also put this picture because I think it can relate to the feelings of the Czech officials that you saw in the videos. I actually had informal interviews with all the people who were speaking. I will show you their names again. And I was feeling the same when I was in the capital where Havel has his bust. I was very honored and grateful for Havel, and that's what they described, what they were feeling during the state visit. So during the interviews, I really felt what they felt, and I will be happy to share some funny stories they told me. Because of course I was only 12 at the time of the visit, but I will be happy to share with you what they told me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is this on? Yes. Well, thank you so much, Veronika. It's such a pleasure. And that was very helpful and informative to kind of set the context for our conversation this evening. Václav Havel was obviously a very fascinating person, an artist, an activist, and a leader, and really a true public servant who really cared deeply for his country. So thank you again for that. I've been looking forward to this program for a long time, and I want to say a special welcome to obviously everyone here in the room and to folks that are joining us online, and special treat in the front row to see Miss Ann here, who Ann Stock worked in the social office, and her husband Grady, and I'm excited that you guys get to see each other and reconnect afterwards. And it's lovely to have you with us tonight. Well, Ambassador Glyn Davies, I had the great privilege of working with Ambassador Davies, and I'm just going to call you Glyn. Can we drop the formalities? Because you were just Glyn back in the day. So, you know, Glyn was the executive secretary to the National Security Council, and I was the director of scheduling for President Clinton. So we had an opportunity to interact a lot, many times a day, many times a week, and we'll get to that a little bit, some stories we can tell later in the program. But first, Glyn, I'd like you to tell us a little bit about the NSC, the National Security Council. When was it established, and how was foreign policy, how was it organized in the White House, and how did the NSC staff manage that policy?
Sure. Well, thanks for that question, Stephanie. And let me just add my thanks. It's so wonderful to be here. I hate to say it, my first trip down here to this library, and I've been to many presidential libraries, and this one is spectacular. So congratulations to everybody who made that happen, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's amazing library. So the NSC, it's one of these things, I don't want to get too bureaucratic on you, but 1947, you know, America just led the world, free world, to defeat the fascist countries. So there were the U.S. government was gearing up to run the world, at least in the short term. So there was an act of Congress in 1947 called the National Security Act, created the United States Air Force, created the CIA, created a whole bunch of other alphabet soup stuff that you know about, and it also created the National Security Council staff. The idea being that the President of the United States needed a dedicated staff to respond to his, or I hope someday her needs, in conducting a foreign policy. So fast forward to when I got on board, the job had evolved a little bit to the point where I had really two roles. I had an inside role and an outside role. My inside role was to respond to the needs of the president through the National Security Advisor, a fellow named Sandy Berger at the time, to make sure that we supported the president in all of his interactions with foreign leaders, for all of his trips when visitors came from abroad. And that meant, we had a staff of about 120 of the very best and brightest from across the US government to prepare for these things, to negotiate these things, write these papers, talking points, speeches. Tony Blinken was our guy.
He was the chief
speechwriter
on this
policy
trip. I was looking at the
yeah.
schedule. Yeah.
And God bless Tony. And he, worked long hours doing that kind of thing. So that was the inside job, running the staff, making sure that it produced what was needed by, in particular, the President of the United States to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. The inside job, more interesting, is how I got to know Stephanie. I sort of was the only guy on the NSC staff who was given license, free rein, to range across the White House complex and deal with the scheduling office, the military office, the staff secretary's office,
social office.
The social office, the dreaded East Wing, the First Lady's staff, which you were always scared to go over there because those ladies were tough. And so I provided this kind of interface, and together we would develop the schedule of the president and talk about the needs that he had, and then try to produce the results that were required for each of these events, trips, pronouncements, speeches that the president was involved in.
Who was your favorite person in the White House? No, I'm just kidding.
Stephanie Street.
Well, let's, on a more serious note, Glyn, the 1990s were tumultuous and transformative time for much of Eastern Europe. And as Veronika shared, Czechoslovakia and then the Czech Republic was really sort of ground zero.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about, remind us about the geopolitical situation at the time?
Sure.
Sort of set that context.
Yeah, well, this was a fascinating time. I mean, my father, who'd also been a U.S. diplomat, and he was a Cold Warrior, spent 40 years of his life fighting, to try to bring about this change. And here I was, a newly minted, Foreign Service officer, seconded to the White House. And this stuff was happening. It was beginning to unfreeze. It was a very fluid time. There were some dangers involved, but a very hopeful time. One fellow, Francis Fukuyama, some of you might have heard of him, wrote this article called "This is the End of History. History's over. Game, set, match. America's won. Democracy will now reign supreme." Wiser heads knew better. And so with all of this ferment going on, Eastern Europe, Central Europe in play, problems in the Balkans, Kosovo, Bosnia, actual bullets flying. There were many, many uncertainties about how it would all come down. And so the decision was made, we're going to enlarge NATO. We want to try to expand NATO to include some of these countries that had been part of the Soviet sphere. The Czech Republic was absolutely critical in all of this because it was one of the first three countries that moved forward along this path. And President Clinton had a special kind of an affinity for first Czechoslovakia when he went there as a student, when he was at school in Oxford. And then later on, he became a very good friend of Václav Havel. They were the same kind of very thoughtful, policy-oriented, but dreamers in a way about what the future could be like. So they clicked. And I think the president saw Václav Havel as a key person to deal with in Europe to help him navigate this way forward. And so that's why I think this particular state visit was so special.
You kind of answered some of my next little question here, but can you talk specifically about the Clinton administration's foreign policy and national security objectives in Eastern Europe broadly, and in the Czech Republic more specifically?
Sure. Well, we had seen this happen before. We'd seen Europe be divided. We wanted so much to prevent that. We wanted to make sure that these new democracies could get on their feet, and there were many, many instruments of state policy that we could use in order to do that. But one of the main ones was to support Václav Havel and the other leaders who were emerging, Lech Wałęsa in Poland, for instance, initially, in order to make sure that this process of NATO enlargement would go forward. We didn't have too many state-to-state issues, tough issues with the Czech Republic. There were some things. The main one was what's called burden sharing. We hear about it still today, which is, come on, Czech Republic, you've got to spend 3%.
Pay up.
For NATO, you got to spend, you got to build up your army, you got to, get serious about having a defense structure and defense policy and contributing to the NATO alliance. There was another issue that had to do with visas and visa-free entry to the United States, but little stuff, some economic issues. So it really left the ground clear for the two countries to talk about the future and to help design the future together. There were some other regional issues as well. The Czech Republic had stepped up. There were peacekeepers, Czech peacekeepers in Africa. Remarkably, they were contributing to the efforts in Bosnia. We wanted to continue to encourage that. But since we didn't have any really scratchy, tough issues between the United States and Czech Republic, it could be about that. It could be about the region. It could be about the future. It could be about how to consolidate once and for all the freedom of Europe. So that, I think, was the main issue.
Veronika, I know you said you were 12 during this period we're talking about, but tell us kind of what life was like on the ground during the mid-90s, and how did the Czech delegation view the United States during this period?
I would like maybe to start how it was seen during the communist era, because you have to understand that the majority of the population really looked up to the United States as a dreamland and a land of country of democracy and freedom. So I think it was still the case in the 90s, and people really it was you have to realize it was only 9 years after the Velvet Revolution, and now the U.S. president is receiving us. So it was an enormous honor for them, and they felt proud. And Havel himself, actually, he really loved the United States. He said to the Czech press after this visit, I love being here. I feel the freedom in the air because of the long history of the democratic system. And I think he went to the United States every year of his presidency. And of course, the NATO was seen as an exclusive club where we just want to be. So thanks for this. And I think you also, when you spoke about their friendship, it's important to mention the role of Madeleine Albright, who brought them together at her place at dinners, and they really had the time and opportunity to develop this friendship.
They really were both very Renaissance men. They both had an appreciation of music, of history, of poetry. I mean, very symbiotic. And like you said, they did have a very close, special relationship. So, and President Clinton had similar relationships with other foreign leaders too.
No, he really did. In fact, he said in the course of this state visit, he talked about the fact that he had just met with Kim Dae-jung in the Republic of Korea, Nelson Mandela. So he was talking to these leaders from different regions of the world who are trying to create in their own context, successful republics, democracies. And here comes Václav Havel, who is a twofer from the standpoint of President Clinton in the United States. Not only is he a man who gets it about the need to try to maintain once and for all a Europe whole and free, and to expand NATO as the instrument to do that, but he was also a deep thinker, and I think this is where they really clicked. He was very much, President Clinton was a wonk. He knew policy, he understood it, he got deep into it. And I think also with Havel, he was somebody who really, really cared about the mechanics, how to make these things work. So they were just peas in a pod, they loved each other. And I got to tell you, I worked on a lot of state visits. This was one of the only one that was just pure sweetness and light.
It really was.
It was a celebration. It wasn't trying to paper stuff over or minimize differences. It was all about this big bear hug between these two men, and using that to kind of radiate outward this positivity about the future, and in particular Europe, but more broadly around the globe, of the march of democracy. So I think that, and it was chemical. It was a chemical thing between them that I think you could see even from a distance.
Well, obviously, we're here in the Clinton Center, so yes. I would love for you, because you have a unique perspective. You served under many presidents.
Right.
I'd love for you, from your vantage point in the Clinton White House, to talk a little bit about President Clinton's leadership style. Was it unique? Sort of how, you talked about building relationships with different leaders. Talk about sort of how Bill Clinton,
sure.
the man, how his approach to leadership was unique or different, and how effective
sure.
do you think
Well,
it was?
I mean, first of all, he was high energy in a way that, I've met every president since Gerald Ford. A few of them I've actually, been in the room with and exchanged words with and had a brief and so forth. The thing about Bill Clinton, he's a people person, and he cares about people. That comes across. He has that charisma, he has that ability, and when he focuses on you and he focuses on an issue, he follows it through. And I think what was different about him was he was reflective about these things. He knew the history of it. He cared about the history of it. He even from a very young age had schooled himself in world politics, so he was somebody who could act with confidence. I've seen other presidents and seen them in action overseas where they weren't really comfortable, I don't think, playing the statesman role. He was comfortable about it because he did it on a personal basis. He wasn't Teddy Roosevelt sending the Great White Fleet around the world. He was a president of the United States who understood the value of getting to know people, going to where they lived, trying to understand what they cared about, and connecting with them that way. And when you traveled with the president, he did this all the time. The motorcade would stop and he'd get out and he'd start shaking hands, and a riot would ensue because he had that kind of star quality that was backed up by, he had the goods, he had the knowledge, he had the experience, and he had thought through these things. And I think that's what made it just a wonderful love fest of a state visit.
Are there any other leaders that you remember, again, from your time, that he had sort of similar special relationships,
Mandela,
or any stories?
Mandela, I think, because I was there on that Africa trip, which is an amazing trip, and they also had a thing, but there's a little, there's history there that I think prevented them from being the kinds of very, very fast friends and soulmates that we see in the Havel relationship. Kim Dae-jung, same kind of thing. He could get along with anybody. He would meet the Dalai Lama, and and all of a sudden, the meeting would radiate outward, and people would take a lot of heart from that. But there was something special about Havel, and I think a lot of it went back to the time that he spoke about during the state visit when he visited Prague as a student. And the last thing I'll say is that he said something interesting, which I actually had forgotten, but was reading up for tonight. He said that when he went there as a student in the pea coat that he bought at an Army Navy store and all the rest of it, and he walked around, what he sensed from the people was these are people who had a thirst for freedom, who wanted democracy. And that taught him a strong lesson about the spirit of the people in Central Eastern Europe, and I think gave him confidence that this project of consolidating democracy there, enlarging NATO would work.
Veronika, anything else about their sort of relationship, any insight, stories, anything else that you would like to share with us?
I think you just said it very well, that this state visit wasn't any tough negotiation or lobby. It was just a celebration because we were already, our membership in NATO was already ratified. And for me, when I was preparing and looking at the archive, you can find like memorandum of conversation, what they negotiated about. And I was pleased to see that President Clinton actually asked for seek opinion, Havel's opinion about Central Europe, about the situation in Slovakia, for example, or which other countries should join NATO. So this was really nice that it was both way relationship.
Right, and he also asked about how to deal with Russia. That was important too, because it was Yeltsin who was kind of an unsteady time, and so I think they had a mind meld about some of these issues that were right front and center.
Yeah. And as you mentioned, I also read the Secretary Cohen. You said to Havel, "You are clearly behaving like an ally even before your accession has taken place,"
yes,
which was really for Havel. It was very important to fulfill the commitments and to help, not only be there to take, but give also.
You mentioned Madeleine Albright. What a wonderful historic figure. And I know you had the opportunity to work with her at the State Department before you came to the White House.
Right.
Are there any stories about Secretary Albright that you'd like? She's been here so many times. We had a wonderful pen exhibit. Many of you will remember that. Any stories that you want to share about her?
She was a great Secretary of State because she also was a people person, and she had a twinkle. And not every Secretary of State, has a sort of a sense of humor, and that came across to people in the State Department. And she was really, really good at connecting with people in the same way, actually, that the First Lady, that Secretary Clinton was when she was in the job, made a priority of going beyond just the palace meeting rooms with the big flowers in the center of the table and toasts and all that stuff, to get out and talk to people and connect that way. I think partly because she was, she'd been a professor. She'd had so many life experiences that she came through that kind of steeled her and gave her perspective. And I think for all those reasons, she, for me anyway, was a great boss at the State Department. I think I was the first Foreign Service officer person in the State Department on her first day on the job to walk into her office, because she had an interview she had to do, and I was the deputy spokesman of the State Department. And I walked into the office and I made a mistake. And I said, Madam Ambassador, I said, "Oh, Madam Secretary."
She was, yes.
And the great thing about Madeleine Albright, she laughed and shit. Yeah, well, better get used to that. I said, yes, I should, ma'am.
That's right. You mentioned that she brought President Clinton and Václav Havel together. Tell me a little bit about that, how she... I know she used to have lots of different salons and dinners and lots of entertaining at her house in Georgetown. It was very sort of an unofficial embassy, if you will.
Totally. It was, as you know, she was born in Czechoslovakia,
right.
And then she really had a very nice relationship, a friendship with Václav Havel. And when she was for him sort of guide for the American politics, and at her house she hosted parties for her birthday or dinners, and I think that's where Clinton and Havel first met, and they discussed the NATO and everything. So it was very important. She played a very important role.
Yeah, she was sort of the secret weapon of the whole thing.
The secret weapon. I love it.
She was that living bridge between the two countries. Yeah,
that's terrific. Well, we've talked a little bit. We've mentioned the state visit. I'd like to get a little bit more into that. And I think most of you know that a state or official visit at the White House is a very elaborate affair, and it involves months and months of planning and detail. And they're really one of the most important diplomatic tools in a president's toolbox. There's a very formal arrival ceremony. There's a lot of pomp and circumstance. There's a luncheon that is hosted by the Secretary of State to the Vice President over at the State Department. And then obviously the fabulous state dinner. And then there's the serious part. So President Clinton and President Havel, after the arrival ceremony, they went over to the West Wing for their bilateral meetings. The First Lady, Hillary Clinton at the time, hosted Mrs. Havlova over in the East Wing. And there's a lot of preparations we talked about. Glyn, talk a little bit about how do you prepare for state visits? And for this particular one, what were our, obviously we've talked a lot about some of the objectives, but talk a little bit about that preparation, what it looks like, not just for this visit, but state and official visits in general.
Well, state visits, I won't get too professorial here because I'm not an academic, but, they go back to the old, ancient times when sovereigns would visit each other. A king, whatever, would go to the next door king, probably related to him, and they would, that would be a whole kabuki to that. Well, republics, democracies, obviously host leaders as well. And so the United States got into this business, though interestingly, we didn't have our first state visit until 100 years after the founding of the Republic, partly because we were a continental nation. So, and there wasn't a whole lot of travel. Remember, the first president to leave the borders of the United States was Teddy Roosevelt, and that wasn't until the 20th century. And the first state visit, which is kind of crazy, was actually the king of Hawaii. And so we got into it kind of reluctantly. Again, continental nations surrounded by oceans, not really interested in entangling alliances and getting involved in the rest of the world. But as we gained in power and importance and began to take on this global geopolitical role, it became something that was very important to do. State visits take 6 months to plan. They're nuts. They require all kinds of moving pieces to them, from the military ceremonials on the South Lawn that are practiced. By the way, a lot of this was John Kennedy's, I think he's the guy who brought in the fife and drum and colonial aspect to it, to the guest list, to the dinner. The dinner is a huge undertaking. I remember when we were planning for a Chinese state visit, we proposed to the Chinese, because there was so much interest in it, we said, look, we'd like to have a huge tent on the South Lawn and invite
pavilion,
a pavilion and invite twice as many guests, because everybody wants to come. And they, of course, thought that was the worst thing they'd ever heard, because in their culture, and this is where we fell down on the job, tents are sort of old-fashioned.
Pedestrian, yes.
B, we want the same treatment everybody else gets, folks. So we're coming to the White House, please, if you will. So they involve a lot of moving parts. All of the White House certainly is involved. A lot of bits of the federal bureaucracy are involved in it. One interesting, crazy little tidbit I remember, I think it's your office. There was one particularly iffy meteorological moment. We were going to have a state visit, so you all are calling, I guess, the senior person at the National Weather Service to say, we need to know, is it going to rain? So a lot of people, a lot of nervousness to get all of this stuff done well, make sure that there are no gaffes. Everything about it. I mean, I could go on forever. I mean, the gifts, choosing the gifts that you give each other. Oh my goodness, the research, this, that, and the other, designing the menu for the state dinner.
Which I have it right here.
They've got the whole menu here.
Yeah.
So the ceremonials are a big part of it. And then a big part of it as well is the preparation by, the so-called substantive folks about the issue papers, the biographies, the sort of gaming out what do we want to happen in the press conference? Right. What do we want to avoid? So it's a big thing. It's a big team sport. A lot of people involved. Takes a long time to do, and then comes game day, and you cross your fingers. And this, of course, turned out to be a textbook example of how state visits ought to be done. I think it all went perfectly.
It really did.
Well,
it did. There were some interesting little stories.
There were interesting stories.
We're going to get to that in a minute.
Yeah.
And I pulled up the schedule from that day, which at the top, scheduling, Stephanie Street, and then it has all these other people on here. And as I was looking through here, I didn't see it on the schedule, but I do know I believe it was during the dinner that President Havel awarded President Clinton with the Order of the White Lion. It didn't show it on the schedule, but could you, Veronika, tell us a little bit about that honor and what it means?
Sure. You can see the order itself in the exhibit. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend. I don't know if Stephanie mentioned it's on display only until May 27. And the order is the highest possible honor highest decoration given to Czechs and to non-Czechs. And it's intended to honor persons who are not citizens of the Czech Republic for superior accomplishments contributing to the welfare of the Czech Republic. And what is interesting, in March 24, just 2 months ago, President Clinton went to Prague, and he received another order from the current Czech president. It is Order of Tomáš Garrigue Masaryk to honor persons who have made eminent contributions to the development of democracy, humanity, and human rights. And I read that there are only 4 persons to have both orders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's
and
really
I also have
fascinating.
may share a nice story that former ambassador Alexander Vondra told me, because it was during the dinner that, this is the 2 orders, you see, President Havel and then current President Pavel, which is just, you change one letter, Havel to Pavel. So, this visit take place during the politically challenging times for Clinton, and of course President Havel wanted to support him as a friend, and when he gave him this order, he wanted to say something very strong, make a strong statement. He wanted to say, "Mr. President, the world needs you." And he did the whole speech in Czech, and it was translated to English. But when it came to this sentence, he said it in English, and he actually turned toward the president. And as you see, the microphone didn't pick up. And it was not translated by the interpreter because it was already in English. So the intention was good, but the realization was
And
not.
was it actually during the dinner, or was it
During
another
the
part
dinner,
of the visit?
at the beginning of the dinner, I think
Okay,
they get
they do
these
toast.
speeches.
Right.
During the toast, yeah.
And I think Glyn, you told me this, that usually they don't wear that, they don't wear it, but because again of the special relationship, President Clinton proudly wore it around that night, like actually had it on during the.
Yeah, well, it's the one time,
Yeah.
because again, the United States of America is a republic, a democratic republic. We don't go in for all this finery and foofara, of foreign decorations and whatnot. But the one time when a president, it's perfectly acceptable to wear these decorations, as soon as he gets it at a state dinner, you can wear it as a mark of respect to the leader who has just conferred it on you. So you can do that. But otherwise, then of course he had to turn around and give it to the National Archives, I guess. Or
Do we have it here? Have you seen it? Is it in the exhibit?
It's in the
It's
exhibit.
upstairs.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
It's upstairs.
I missed
And
that.
actually, the sentence is there, Mr. President, the world needs you.
Oh, that's wonderful.
That's good.
Okay, let's get into some of the details of this particular state
Some of the
visit,
juicy
because it was a
stuff.
little bit unconventional, okay? As we talked about, when state visits are planned, I know that President and Secretary Clinton really spent a lot of time planning state visits. Secretary Clinton really was very involved, and those of you who were here a few months ago when Ambassador Capricia Marshall was here, she talked a little bit about her role in the social office and as chief of protocol and the level of detail. But again, trying to make it very special, everything from the cuisine to the entertainment to the flowers to the colors, everything is meticulously planned ahead of time. And for this particular visit, given President Clinton's very close relationship and his love of music, he wanted to make sure that we really had some really top great entertainment. So we asked, or President Clinton asked them at the State Department to ask Václav Havel who he would like to have. And he chose the rocker Lou Reed for this particular state visit. Can one of you comment, maybe Veronika, you first, on why Lou Reed, and then we'll talk a little bit about the actual performance.
Okay, thank you. As I mentioned, in the 60s, in the Czechoslovakia, the time was more relaxed, and some bands inspired by the Western music were created. And one of them was the band Plastic People of the Universe, created in 1968, and they were clearly inspired by Velvet Underground. But after the Soviet invasion, these groups were persecuted. And I would like to read this text because I think it explains very well. And it was written by Havel himself. It was published in the booklet together with the menu. These few groups were persecuted in numerous ways for years, and not because they were a political opposition, but only because they acted free. The best known of these was a group called the Plastic People of the Universe, whose great inspiration was the Velvet Underground. The persecution of the Plastics culminated in 1976 with the imprisonment of its members and their friends. When this occurred, a sense of solidarity on a larger scale re-emerged in the Czech lands. This ultimately led to the first widespread movement for human rights in the entire Soviet camp, Charter 77. It is therefore possible to say that the music of that group became a kind of guide or symbol for the struggle for freedom in Czech lands. I am very grateful that President Clinton honored my request to invite Lou Reed to this dinner. I am no less grateful that Lou Reed, one of the founders of the Velvet Underground, invited the longtime leader of the Plastic People of the Universe, Milan Hlavsa, to perform with him. Joining us on this historic night are two legends from our two nations who both, in one way or another, are bound with the ideals of freedom. It's very nice.
Thank you. Well, let's talk a little bit about Lou Reed. I had the privilege of attending that state visit and was seated at the same table with Lou Reed and his wife, Lori Anderson, and my dinner partner was Rick Ocasek from the Cars. It was a very interesting conversation. It was a very interesting table. My fiance at the time was seated at a table. He was a hockey player, and Capricia Marshall, who some of you know, who served as the White House Social Secretary during that time, took great pains to always put people next to people that they would enjoy speaking with. So she put my husband next to Jaromír Jágr, and also at their table was Paulina Portickova. I'm glad that she wasn't seated right next to my fiance at the time, but was at the same table.
A model?
She was a model, yeah. Yes, quite.
I don't remember her.
Yes. Of course you don't. But anyway, in preparation, there's always a rehearsal for the entertainment. And at that particular rehearsal, Secretary Clinton invited Václav Havel to come to the rehearsal that day so he could hear Lou Reed and have a chance to visit with him before the dinner that night. Well, during the rehearsal, the music was so loud. They had never seen anything like that at the White House before. And the chandeliers were literally vibrating. Gary Walters, who was the chief usher, was very concerned, is a nice way to put it. And it said something to Secretary Clinton or the First Lady that he was very concerned about the volume and the chandelier shaking. We sure didn't want those to drop on anyone during the dinner. So she asked, the First Lady asked Capricia afterwards after the rehearsal to please ask Lou Reed to turn the volume down. And she was a little anxious and nervous about that. He was a little bit high maintenance, Lou Reed was, in terms of he wanted everything exactly right. And so everything went well with the rehearsal. It was very loud. Václav Havel was super excited to be there. So Capricia was in her mind, like, trying to figure out how she was going to ask him to do this. So she just went up to him and said, Mr. Reed, the rehearsal was terrific. It sounds really great, but it's a little bit loud. And so I need to ask you if you would please, the chief usher asked if you would please turn the volume down a little bit. He got so upset. He was offended. And he ended up saying to Capricia at that time, "Are you asking me to change my art?" And he said no, he would refuse, he would just not play. Obviously, we did not want to have this.
This would have been a problem.
This would have been a huge problem. So Capricia, being as very, diplomatic, again, later serving as the chief of protocol, was trying to figure out a way to appease him. And as they continued talking, Lou Reed said, "Oh, and by the way, I would really like some of my bandmates to be able to come in and listen to the concert and be able to be seated during the performance." And she, with a very, straight face, looked at him and said, I've been working on this state visit for months. We've had very detailed planning and the seating charts and the flowers. And you are asking me at this late date to add people to this room? Are you asking me to change my art? To make a long story short, the volume got turned down, and Lou Reed's bandmates were invited to sit in the East Room to watch the entertainment.
That fixed that, yeah.
Yeah. It was pretty interesting. Another little interesting story I'll share, and I think I may have shared this at another program when we were talking about state visits with Capricia here. This particular visit, as I mentioned, I was seated at the table with these really interesting people. The conversation was phenomenal. It was just mind-blowing in some ways. But about 15 minutes before, I could see that Lou Reed was getting very anxious and wasn't really speaking. And he said that he was just trying to, in his mind, prepare for the concert. He obviously wanted to do a good job for President Havel and for President Clinton. And he looked at me and he said, "I need to go out and have a cigarette." And I said, "I'm so sorry, but this is a non-smoking campus. We don't have smoking anywhere on the grounds here at the White House. I'm sorry, that won't be possible." And in that same sort of way he told Capricia, he said, "Well, if I can't have a cigarette, then I'm not going to be able to perform." And then his wife, Laurie Anderson, popped up and said, "And I need a cigarette too." And I can't remember if Rico Kasich also decided that he wanted to be part of that, but I definitely remember Laurie Anderson and Lou Reed saying, he's like, "Well, I'll just walk out. I won't perform." So I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, this is all going to be my fault. But we don't have Secretary Clinton, when she came to the White House, that was one of the first things. She established a no smoking campus. So I thought, okay, I'm going to have to figure this out. I'm definitely not going to ask permission because that's not going to work out. And that's going to really stress Capricia out. So I said, okay, here's what we're going to do. I'm going to excuse myself and go to the to the powder room, and you are going to come to the bottom of the stairs. Excuse yourself. You two come to the bottom of the stairs, and I will take you outside to smoke a cigarette. I was like shaking in my boots. And so they came down the stairs, they met me. I took them out through the kitchen, out to an area near the dumpster behind the White House. And he smoked his cigarette. And I was I was sweating bullets. I'm like, "You've got to hurry, you've got to hurry. They're going to notice that you're gone. I'm going to get fired. This is such a, Anyway, he had his cigarette. The concert was phenomenal. The chandeliers were shaking. I don't think he turned the volume down. But I don't think the White House had ever seen anything like that before. It was unbelievable, but so well received. I mean, it was, I don't know if there's been anything like that since. Has there, Glyn?
I don't know. I mean, I have to say, and then came the dancing, right?
Then came the dancing. Yeah. So I pulled up the schedule to sort of look at the TikTok of everything. And usually after dessert, they're very formal. The military escorts the president and the first lady out of the room with President Havel and Mrs. Havlova, and the plan was for them to escort them to the North Portico to depart for the evening, and then the Clintons would return, and there was always like dancing afterwards with the Marine band. So they get up to leave, and President Havel says, "I don't want to leave. I'm not ready to leave. We want to stay for the dancing." So it was just so wonderful. The four of them then went out on into the grand foyer, and the music was playing. And I think is there a photo you can see of First Lady Hillary Clinton and Václav Havel dancing at that. It really was sort of such a signature, iconic moment, not just from that state visit, but really from the administration, to really showcase that warm relationship with the Havels. And Mrs. Havlova was delightful as well, very substantive, very smart. I know that she and Secretary Clinton, or First Lady Clinton, had a separate schedule that day. I don't remember, or if you remember what they did, but it wasn't just your regular sort of tea and cookies. I think they visited a school or did something.
I think a hospital or
a hospital. Yeah, I think that's right. The menu was quite fancy as well. I have a copy of it here. Just to give you sort of a flavor of these very fancy state visits. There's so many pieces of silverware on the table. It's very intimidating.
A lot of glasses, too.
A lot of glasses, lots of different forks and things that you've never seen before. But this state visit, the first course was gingered pheasant consommé with a ravioli of chanterelles and sweet potatoes and pheasant confit on lemon spinach.
Yum.
That's just the first course. It was pretty great. Lots of other courses, many courses. Again, they always have wines that, are reflective of what's being served at the meal. One thing a lot of people don't know about again, First Lady Clinton, she took a really deep interest in preparing for these visits. And again, wanting the White House to be a place to showcase the best of American culture, the best of American cuisine. I think we've talked about it, a previous program that she actually changed, and it was a little bit controversial when she first got there. She wanted to have an American chef instead of a French chef. And she also thought it was important that we serve the food American style. Previously at state visits, it was always served French style, which is on these big platters, and everyone in their finery has to try to negotiate like getting your own piece entree off of the big silver tray, and it's very intimidating. But again, those were just a few of the ways that I keep saying Secretary Clinton, the First Lady at that time, really honed in on the specialness and how proud we were to have the White House showcase really the finest parts of our culture. And she just spent so much time on it. Let me go to, you talked about the other entertainer and how important that was to the lineup. Let's talk a little bit about President Clinton's visit to the Czech Republic.
Can I just add
Sure.
one thing about the Milan
Yeah.
Hlavsa, because
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that
No, I appreciate it.
Havel was really, maybe to add just, he was playwright in his heart, and that's why he enjoyed to surprise and intrigue people. And I think he brought the joy and playfulness to politics. So he wanted to connect people who would not meet otherwise. That's why he invited Lou Reed to perform, to connect the two worlds, people in the nicest dress and with the menu like this, and then the rock music. And actually about this table with Jaromír Jágr, when you see it here, and there was, it's just that, one of the
There it is,
Czech
right
officer,
there. You can see.
One of the Czech officer he told me, if he remembers well, there was also the general Attorney General Janet Reno who sat there, and she just said, I have never seen something like that. And he thought that was the feeling Havel wanted to bring. But at the same time, she was like moving her feet and body together with Jágr, and they had a great time. And then when the dancing part came, so the atmosphere was so relaxed that Jágr actually asked one of the Czech staffer, do you think I can ask Hillary Clinton to dance with me?
Oh, really?
I don't know if there are no pictures of it, but
they did. Okay, that's great.
I don't know.
It was a very relaxed. It wasn't like you're stuffy. I mean, yes, of course, you always observe appropriate protocol, and that's super important. But this was a very relaxed, a very different vibe of the state dinner.
And
I've never seen that photo before, and I can see the back of my husband's head right there. He used to have hair, seated at that table directly across from Jaromír Jágr. So I'd like to get a copy of that and see if there's any of him, the front of him instead of just the back of his head. If that's
I also put all these names of the very famous people and artists, because I think that shows how Havel was seen and well accepted also in the artistic world. So for the Czechs, it was also great to meet all these people in person. They were like icons for them. And it was strange for me because David Duchovny, he was listed as a famous Czech American, but actually his father has only Ukrainians and Polish roots and no Czech. So
Close enough, maybe.
No, yeah, they just invited him because X-Files were so popular. Yeah, so that's...
Veronika, let me ask you, while you have the mic, can you reflect a little bit on the relationship between the Czech Republic and the United States and the foundations, how that was laid during the Clinton administration, and how today even it benefits both countries?
So I have this picture when President Clinton was at the Czech Republic really lately in March 2020.
2 months ago, just 2 months ago he was there, yeah.
And I would like to share with you my personal opinion that after Havel, we had two really populist and horrible presidents, which were really like, we tried to crush all the Havel's ideals, and they were there for a long 20 years because they both served 2 terms. And only 1 year ago, we elected, no, sorry, can I just have the presentation? We elected a very nice president, Petr Pavel, and I was so happy to see this reproduction of the meeting in Reduta, actually, when in 1994, Havel invited President Clinton to the jazz club Reduta, and he gave him a saxophone there.
And he played it. He played Summertime.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. And so 2 months ago, Czech president re-invited President Clinton to the jazz club, and yeah, it's just really nice.
I don't think he played his saxophone.
No, he
this
didn't.
time around.
He didn't play it, but it was nice as well. And I also put our prime minister, because in our country, prime minister has also a very important role.
Of course.
And you see him with Clinton. And just 1 month ago, in April, he was received by Joe Biden in the White House. So I just think that in the future there will be another state visit, maybe.
Thank you. Glyn, can you talk a little bit about the Clinton administration's legacy of leadership with respect to global peace and prosperity, exemplified by the support of new democracies and the expansion of NATO?
Sure. Well, it's interesting because, that's the big question. So, so what? So this happened, and it was an important meeting, and in the context of the time, it helped a lot to go forward with this strategy that we had and we shared with our Western European allies to strengthen NATO and expand it, try to consolidate some of these new democracies into it. And, so, okay, that happened. But I think it actually has direct relevance to today and to what we're seeing happen today in Europe because of these efforts to consolidate NATO, to strengthen NATO, to expand it, bring new members in and bring them in the right way. That set the table, set the conditions, created the conditions, I believe, for what we've seen recently. Because as a guy, this is what I did as a junior guy in the Foreign Service. I did NATO policy and worked on this alliance stuff a lot, European issues. But today, and in recent months and the last few years, what have we seen NATO do? Mm-hmm. For one thing, we've seen countries join NATO. It never was imagined possible that Finland, which has been historically a neutral nation, that Sweden would join NATO, that that other states in Europe would express interest in that. And I think it's almost incontrovertible that the predicate for this was laid back during that period when we had a president of the United States who got it right and who devoted a lot of energy and effort and thought to forming the relationships that were needed and creating the NATO of today, such that when the Russians invade Ukraine, what does Europe do? Almost in a way with more alacrity than the United States, they step up, and you get Germany and other countries providing weapons to Ukraine. You get the states in the northern tier joining NATO, and it still astounds me that Finland would have joined NATO. But that's because of, I think, these decisions made and the leadership of President Clinton to make sure that the alliance was ready for the modern era, that it had the right set of principles, the right membership, the right criteria, so that it would continue to live on and continue to help to keep Europe whole and free. So I see a direct line between that and this really existential crisis, this fight that's happening in Europe today. And I think a lot of Americans don't believe, really, how's that ever going to affect us? And I think, I think it absolutely can. I think you can bet on it, that if Putin succeeds in crushing Ukraine, he's not going to stop there. Because as a despot, that's the only way he's going to stay in power. I think it's by continuing to roll, and he'll go next for the Baltic states. He'll try to disrupt Southeastern Europe. I think you can probably bank on it, but we're stronger and better for this diplomacy that President Clinton engaged in with Václav Havel and the other leaders of Europe. So I think that there is a link between some of this. We're talking about some of the more colorful aspects to it, but that's diplomacy. It's
Right.
Diplomacy is about connecting people and showing respect for people and showing respect for their culture. And I mean, what a brilliant move of Václav Havel to bring in Lou Reed. I mean, it just created a whole new dimension to the thing. And it, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. And here we go. We're in another period of scariness happening in Europe, but we're stronger for the efforts made, I think, by these two leaders at that meeting, a generation ago.
Glyn, you obviously have had a very distinguished career, and during the Clinton administration, you were the executive secretary 2 years. Tell us a little bit about some of the roles you had after that.
Oh, yeah, I'm one of these guys who can't hold a job. So I've had lots of different experiences. I was sent off to Vienna to represent the United States to the United Nations there, and there's 8 UN agencies, and the big one was the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency. So I was there working on, the issues relating to North Korea's nuclear weapons. We had the Fukushima Daiichi meltdown of the reactors there. That was instrumental. And for my sins in that job, I got picked to be the North Korea negotiator. So for a couple of years, I negotiated with the North Koreans in first in Switzerland, then in
what
Beijing.
time period was that? Under which president?
Boy, oh boy, this was Obama. I was appointed by Obama, so it was Obama's first term. And anyway, so unlike when President Trump tried to go at it, we actually did reach a deal. He didn't get to one, but we did. It didn't last because Kim Jong-un blew it up. So I had that experience as well. And I've done a bunch of other things. I've served in Australia, Europe, in Africa, and Asia, and of course in Washington, in the State Department, the White House. So have had a kaleidoscopic career. I wouldn't trade it for anything. The high point of it, I gotta say, was working at the White House. And what I always tell people is, if you go to work at the White House as a regular old bureaucrat like I was, it's the most exciting, exhausting experience, but there are no secrets left after that. You know exactly how it all works because you've seen it.
You've seen it
at that level.
Have you done an oral history? Or that's
I actually am in trouble because I did. There is an oral history that I'm supposed to edit and turn in, and they're very mad at me. The Library of Congress, because it's something you're supposed to do when you retire as an ambassador, is do this oral history. Who knows? Who cares about these
Let's
things?
put that on our list, Jay. Let's do it. Let's get an oral history.
First, I got to finish it, so I got to finish it, and then anyway. So yeah, 38 years in the Foreign Service, did lots of things, but this was the highlight. Working at the White House, absolutely the most exhilarating thing as an American public servant to go and work and have a little tiny office in the basement of the West Wing of the White House.
Just like me, a little tiny office in the basement of the West Wing with no windows.
Yours is a little bit bigger.
It wasn't that much bigger. It used to be the hair salon.
That's true.
In one administration.
That is true.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
But just to have that experience is a sort of a pinch me kind of thing if you're a public servant. And that's why I'm here, because Stephanie called. And I couldn't say no, and I wanted to come down here and see this 20 years later, spectacular museum and see you. Yes, she hasn't changed, and talk a little bit about this crazy stuff that we did. And I think, I hope, I believe it made a difference. So,
do you have a favorite story? You just mentioned that was the highlight of your career. What is something that you meant besides this incredible state visit?
I think just the surreal experience of. I mentioned this, I think, but President Clinton likes to play cards. He plays hearts. He's good at hearts, really good at hearts. And so we had this marathon game that started in Marine One, taking off from the South Lawn, flew out to Andrews, Air Force One, up to, I think, Pease Air Force Base in New Hampshire. He did some events up there. It's like 10 o'clock at night. He comes out of this event, and I'm in the staff car with, the doctor and everybody. He goes like this. It's like, oh no. This game of hearts that we had begun on Marine One on the South Lawn hours before and he, by the way, the president keeps score.
Oh, yes, he does.
He insists on it, so he's keeping score. So I'll be quick about this. President of the United States of America, we're in the Beast in this car, driving to get on Air Force One to go back to DC, where we arrived at about 2 a.m. But he's on a phone call with a senator or something. He's got a briefing paper preparing for his next, thing, and he's playing hearts, and he's counting the cards, I think, because he's got that kind of a mind. I don't have that kind of a mind. And so I go to lay something. I'm trying to lay the, 9 of clubs or something. And he covers up his suit. He said, Glyn, you don't want to lay that card. And I thought to myself, seriously? he sort of has inferred what is in my hand. And okay. So I took the card back. And I won that game, and then he signed the scorecard. The only game I ever won playing with him because he's so good. He said, Glyn, you won, Bill Clinton. So that is my crazy pinch me moment that I had in the White House. So.
Any closing comments or final thoughts?
I think we are running out of time.
That's all right. No, we could go on. There's so many stories. Anne McCoy could probably get up here and tell a bunch of stories too, but we won't. Oh no, we're out of time. Yes, there's, of course.
Well, congratulations on your terrific career. Can you, in the context of everything that you lived through, can you find reason for optimism about Europe and about America today?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, partly I'm just an optimist, but yeah, I think so. I've served in parts of the world like the Congo, and I know what this country means to people out there, and you see it sort of comparatively when you spend a lot of your life living overseas and you work on foreign policy. And I just think that our fundamentals are so strong as a nation. We always find our way through stuff, even as some really, really scary, sticky stuff. The Civil War being the biggest example of that. And even though things don't look, hunky-dory for the near future, and it's frightening to think about it, I believe as a nation we'll come through it. Partly because I think we have to come through it. I don't know what it's going to take, but I'm very optimistic about our nation. And one of the main reasons is because we're a nation of nations. We draw this strength from around the world, and I know people get it. I too am concerned about illegal immigration, all the rest. But having this we're a growing nation. We're a growing industrialized nation, and most industrialized nations aren't growing demographically. And so I think that the future's bright. I think we've got some stuff we got to go through first. I think we have to have this national conversation in some form or fashion and try to work out these differences that we've got. But I'm very positive that we'll come through it. Last thing I'll say is, my father was in this business. He started in 1947. He fought in World War II, went across the Omaha beaches. Then he joins the Foreign Service and served, and he was a Cold Warrior. So he served in Moscow twice and all around the periphery. His career was containment, and he retired, and 7 years later, the Berlin Wall came down. And he was a, greatest generation guy. He never said anything about it. But there were times in his 35-year career when I'm sure it looked like, Vietnam. You can name a bunch of different periods when things didn't look good, and yet we came through it all, and democracy prevailed, and freedom prevailed, and that was largely because of the actions taken by the United States of America. So I'm very positive about the future. I just don't see how we're going to get through the next little period, but that's up to everybody to think about it and vote and debate it and all that stuff. So
I can maybe finish by a nice quote of Václav Havel. His motto: "Truth and love must prevail over lies and hatred."
Yes.
Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Anyway.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to you, Jay.
Great conversation about this really magical moment 25 years ago and the way in which it continues to have a legacy today, both here and in the geopolitics in which the United States remain involved and in the Czech Republic. And I really want to thank all three of you for just a fantastic conversation. Let's thank all three of these. Also, I do want to thank Veronika in particular for giving her joy to our staff over the last 4 months. And she will be with us a couple more months, and so we look forward to that. I do want to also remind everyone that Be Our Guest still has 2 weeks to run, and thank Stephanie Sims again for her leadership in putting together a great exhibit. Please spread the word for folks who may not have come to come down. And we look forward to our next temporary exhibit coming later in the summer, and just sign some documents for some loans that are it's going to be a fantastic exhibit. So something to look forward to in the near future. Again, I want to thank you all for coming out tonight. We have great programs here. You all know that. This is a great example of it. Tomorrow at noon, we have another program in the same room on truth commissions and state building. And so would love for you to come out. And again, please always know that this is your presidential library, your presidential center, and it's a great place for us to spend our time. One last word, if you're not ready to go home tonight, 42 Bar and Table is open, so head on downstairs, but we can't wait to see you next time at the Clinton Presidential Center. Thank y'all.
Thank you. Obviously, thank the folks that tuned in tonight, but we could not open our doors on any day without the help of our incredible volunteers. We have such a wonderful cadre of people who represent the President and Secretary Clinton and our administration and sort of our ongoing work of the Clinton Foundation, of the Library, of the Clinton School every day, and want to recognize and thank them. And obviously, we couldn't do any of this without the support of our Clinton Center ambassadors, the folks that make this work possible. So thank you to those who are our Clinton Foundation donors and friends. These types of programs are only offered because of the resources that you provide and allow us to do these. So thank you again. Enjoy your evening and hope to see you downstairs at 42 Bar and Table.